don't know how we're going to solve that problem. Okay, so how do I fix it? Update. Okay, so Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala ashraf al-anbiya wal-mursaleen, nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man ittaba hudahu ila yawm ad-din, thumma amma ba'du. Inshallah ta'ala, we're just going to get right into it. Hayyakumullah. So, let's start with Aqidah, which is Mukhtasar Ma'arij Qabul. And if you guys remember, the point that we were talking about, the issue that we were talking about last class, dealing with Tawheed, or the oneness of God, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we talked about the connection between worship and lordship. What was the connection that we spoke about? What is the connection between worship and lordship that we spoke about last class? Who can tell me? Connection between worship and lordship. Okay, now I have to hold on, make this clear. Let me see if I can bring up the class on this phone, because really I'm not going to be able to, anyone that's in my personal page trying to comment, I won't be able to see your comments. So let me see if I can pull that up here. Man, it's so easy it is to get sidetracked. How you do this? I'm not seeing it. Okay, hold on, maybe it'll be right here. Yeah, I can't, won't be able to see your answers. So I'm going to be focusing on the my other rooms, inshallah. Okay. Yes, thanks, Imam. Yes, we're gonna delve into that a little bit, inshallah. The issue about the Iqama. It's gonna be a couple classes, though. I want to really mention some of the different opinions in certain aspects of it. So we're gonna be studying that for the fiqh aspect of the class, Bismillah ta'ala. So, okay, going back to the issue of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah in worship and the oneness of Allah in lordship. Now, last class, we said that knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one that God, he is the one that created us. He's the one that provided for us. He's the one that has set everything in motion. The reason why we're alive today, the reason why the sun gives us light, all of these things, the plan of this world, all these things was done by Allah's wisdom. Knowing that necessitates that we worship him. Knowing that necessitates that we worship him. Those two things go together. Because if you understand that Allah created us alone, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he planned this world alone. And he put everything into motion alone. Then it would only make sense that we worship him alone. Now, what we're going to talk about today is the fact that knowing that Allah, that God created us, and he's our Lord and Master, knowing that alone does not make a person upon Tawheed. This does not make a person an individual who singles out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship. So even though one necessitates the other, it is not always the case. So because an individual knows that Allah exists and knows that Allah created him, right, he understands that, and he understands that no one else is able to do this other than the Lord of the world. He understands this. He or she understands this. But that does not mean that they will take the next step and worship Allah alone. We understand that if that was the case, then there will be no issues with the Prophet Muhammad and the people of his time. Because the people of his time, the pagan Arabs, they understood this fundamental fact. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the creator, he's the benefactor that has given us and blessed us with all that we have. They understood that. And that is the reason why the Shaykh, he brings the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَهُمْ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهُ فَأَنَّا يُؤْفَكُونَ. If you were to ask them, the pagan Arabs, who created them, they would say Allah. So they understand this, yet they weren't considered Muslim. Why? Because that understanding did not bring them to worshiping Allah alone. They worship Allah, but they did not worship him alone. They did not worship God alone. They did not understand what that entails of worship. So this is the point that the Shaykh is trying to make us understand, that just because we understand that Allah alone is the creator does not necessarily mean that him alone we worship. Insha'Allahu ta'ala. And that's all we're going to cover here for this aspect, is the fact that someone who worships Allah, it shows, it indicates that they understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone created them, created everything. He's the Lord and Master of all that is, right? They understand that. But in their worship, do they also understand that he's the only one who deserves to be worshipped alone? And remember, when we talk about worship, we're not just talking about prayer. Anything that God commands us to do and that he tells us to stay away from, doing that should be only for him alone. And because of him alone, that is an act of worship. That is an action of either a compliance in whichever way it is, whether it's compliance by staying away or compliance by avoiding. These things are, or that action itself is an act of worship. So with that understanding, inshallah ta'ala, I hope that that is clear. And the floor for any questions, but I don't think there will be any questions in regards to that. It's pretty straightforward. Let's give you guys some time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And this, this fact too as well. Just to kind of side rail here and see if we have any questions. Is an issue that a lot of people in the Muslim ummah, in the Muslim community, have a problem with. They think because an individual is Muslim that they are not, or they can't fall into associating partners with Allah in worship. And you can if you don't understand what worship is. If you believe that worship is only prayer alone, then all the other things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do, like for example, what are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm going to ask you guys, what are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do that an individual can associate other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it? Other than prayer. What? Let me repeat the question again. What are some of the things outside of prayer that are acts of worship that if a Muslim was to do it for other than Allah, they would nullify their tawheed? Paying zakat to okay, so what do you mean by paying zakat? Paying zakat is an act of worship, right? So if you're paying zakat for other than Allah, is that what you're saying? That will go back to intentions. Or in a scenario, somebody else says that they are a messenger, and that, instead of paying the zakat that you normally would, they have new revelation that has come to them that, the zakat is so much, it's this X amount, and you should pay to them instead in a specific time, specific amount, specific place. Yes, if you listen to that and you do that, then yes, that you're committing shirk and stuff like that too as well. Or it could just be that, you pay the zakat, the Islamic zakat, the way that it should be paid, but your intentions for paying it is not solely to please your Lord. Then that will, of course, be shirk, associating partners with Allah in worship. Because one of the things that have to be met, the criteria that have to be met for any action to be accepted, is that it has to be akhlas wa aswab. It has to be sincerity for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, which goes back to intention. And then it has to be aswab. It has to be upon the sunnah. It's a funny thing that I remember a brother and I, we were actually arguing about the issue of fasting, right? Because I think I told him that it was a long time ago. Let me clarify that. It was a long time ago. I was just starting to study. I was in Egypt. And I just tell a brother, I fast whenever I feel the mood to fast. So if I wake up one day and I'm like, inshallah, I feel like fasting, I fast. And he was like looking at me like I was crazy. Like, what do you mean by you fast? I fast whenever I get the courage or the notion to fast. I fast. So you're saying that that I shouldn't do that, because that's not what you should do is try to fast the way that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam fasts. So Monday, Thursday, or what he recommended, which is the odd days. I'm sorry, not the odd days, but every other day, right? This was what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do. And of course, there was, the sittat, which is the 6 days of Shawwal, and so forth. Okay. Okay, somebody says, he says practicing the 5 pillars. So if you practice the 5 pillars, other than Allah, once again, that goes back to intentions. But for example, a way of associating partners with Allah is by swearing by other than Allah. Swearing by other than Allah. Like, we're only supposed to swear by Allah. And we have some Shiites that they would swear by Hassan and Hussein or Ali, from what I hear. I don't, it's been a while since I studied their creed, but I do believe that some of them do that. Think it's okay to swear by Ali or Hassan or Hussein. So when you think about the swearing, why do we swear by something? We have to break that. I think we really have to understand what it is. Sometimes when we do an action, we're not fully aware of what it means, what it represents. And I think that if we were to sit and think about it clearly, we'd have some understanding of why things are the way that they are. Okay. So when we swear, a swearing is validation. And it's validation, and it's more than that. Swearing is giving something importance, a level of importance too as well. It's validation and giving a level of importance to the thing that you're swearing by. You're using that name that you swear by as a testimony to your oath, to your pledge that you're making after that. It's binding. You're binding yourself to what you're saying after that by swearing by that name that you swear by. And this is the reason why something like swearing is only done using or by Allah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man kana halifan falyahlif billah." If you're going to swear, then swear by Allah. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that. Why? Because swearing by Allah is a form of ta'zeem. It's a form of reverence to the thing that you're swearing for, and giving reverence is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this type of scenario. Okay, so with that, then we'll stop with that, inshallah ta'ala, and we'll move on to the next section of the class, which is about the 40 hadith, and we're on hadith 34. And it's the hadith of Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, أنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول من رأى منكم منكرا فيغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان. رواه Muslim. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, in the 34th hadith of the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, he said that he heard the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, if one of you sees something that is wrong, then let him try and change it with his hands. If he's not able to do that, then change it with his tongue. If he's not able to do that, then hate it in his heart, and that is the weakest of faith. So what we understand, okay, so let's try and change some of the words a little bit so we get an understanding. So when we say change it with his hand, meaning change by force. Apply force in order to change that wrong. And that type of change is for somebody who has authority, right? If you have authority, you can change things by force. Make someone comply to that which is right and that which is correct. So that goes to anybody who's in charge. Mother, when it comes to her children. Husband, when it comes to his family. Imam, when it comes to his community. And so forth. Another thing that we understand too is the issue about changing with the tongue, meaning using words or writing, which is in the same level as using words, writing about it. So you see something that is wrong, you can write about it, you can talk about it. But it's important to know that if the person that is doing the wrong is a person of authority, the best way, like the Prophet ﷺ said, to change that is to first advise them in private. You advise them in private first. That is what the Prophet ﷺ advises us to do when it comes to an individual in authority. And it only makes sense. It is from wisdom that an individual tries to do it that way, right? So writing something on Facebook, putting somebody out there, having them be barren to the words that you're using and things like that, the shame, the humiliation, is that a way to bring about good? Because one of the principles of Islam is to get the good and repel the bad. And if you can't get the good without repelling a bad, which is even worse, then you can't do it. Right? So keep that in mind. So the next thing is hating it in your heart, and that is the weakness of faith. Faith. So what we understand from this too is that faith is something that increases and decreases. And one of the things that increases it or decreases it is someone's condition or situation. And it's also something that could be limited to certain instances, I guess you could say. So in this instance, an individual's faith could be weak. But in another scenario, his faith could be strong. In this situation, he's not able to implement the highest form of faith, but he's only able to implement the form which is a little lower than that, and so forth. So this is proof that shows that faith increases and decreases. It increases with obedience, and it decreases with disobedience. Okay, so are there any questions on that? I think that is also straightforward. Give you guys a little time, inshallah, see if there's any questions. There are any questions. Okay. It looks like there aren't any questions, so let's move on. Inshallah ta'ala. All right, so the next thing we're going to cover is Sirah or the biography of the Prophet Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. The last class we spoke about the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam traveling to or making the migration to Medina, and that the first thing that he did was build a masjid in Quba, and then built his masjid, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, the prophetic masjid, or what's known now as Masjid al-Haram al-Nabawi, or Masjid al-Nabawi. Does anyone remember what was the benefit that we got from that? What did we understand from the Prophet ﷺ doing that? Does anyone remember the benefit that we took away from that action of the Prophet Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi? Okay, I know that the connection is kind of slow, so maybe there's some delay. That's why I'm giving you guys time to answer, but I don't believe that anyone is typing an answer. So let's answer it. So we got from that the importance of the masjid in the community, and that the first thing that an individual should do, or a group of individuals should do when they settle in a place, is to make sure that they build a masjid, make sure that they build a place of worship. That's one of the first things that should be done for the community. Inshallah ta'ala. Okay. So now we're going to talk about what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, or the next two lines, which the Sheikh says, ثم بنى من حوله مساكن ثم أتى من بعد في هذه السنة أقل من نصف الذين سافروا إلى بلاد الحبش حين هاجروا. Okay, so after the Prophet ﷺ settled in Medina, news of his migration from Mecca to Medina reached the Muslims. Who can tell me where some of the Muslims were at this time? Where were some of the Muslims when they got the news that the Prophet ﷺ had migrated to Medina? Where were they? Niggas. Niggas, isn't that the name of the king? I guess they were with him. I was hoping for a place though, but yeah, they were in Habasha, or what's known as Ethiopia. Right? So that's where they were. They were in Ethiopia. So when they heard this news, some of them left Ethiopia and went to Medina. And here, the Sheikh, he said that it was less than half of the people that migrated to Ethiopia, less than half of them left and went to Medina. al-Madina an-Nabawiyya. So it's important to know too that once the Prophet ﷺ, before we talk about those that that left Habasha, that left Ethiopia to go and be with the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, that the Sheikh here, he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ, after building his masjid, he built a place or a dwelling place for himself, right? And the scholars, they mentioned that the dwelling place that he built first was for Sauda, Mu'mineen Sauda, radiyallahu anha, and then he built after that, not at the same time, but after some time after that, he built a second dwelling place for Aisha, radiyallahu anha, because he married her after marrying Sauda. Now there's certain things, there's some things that we can extrapolate from the actions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When it comes to living with one's spouse or a wife, and that you should have a place for your family to dwell at. They have to have a place to live. Right? You have to provide a place for them to live. Whether it is built, but back then it's easy to build. I mean, there are no not too much, and no one's gonna stop you from building. But according to we know that the Prophet ﷺ had to buy the land that the masjid is on, right? And the Muslims provided him with the money for that, right? But there are other places where during that time where you could just go somewhere and pitch a tent and you're good, as long as it's nobody's land. So providing a place for your family is important. It's also important to know that the the quality of living during that time is not like the quality of living in our time. The room, and it's considered a room, the room of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ was no bigger than half of the praying area here for in this masjid, right? So half of it, long ways, you have the bedroom, and then you have a little space before you get to the front door. Right. So as far as what that space was used for, I'm not sure, but it's some of the scholars say that the length of the entire house was somewhere. I think it was let me see. They said 10 arm length long. So 10 arm length long. It's not, like I said, it's from here to there, pretty much. Maybe not even that big. I think it might be smaller than this. And that used to be the dwelling place for the wives of the Prophet sallallahu wasallamu alayhi wa radiyallahu anhum. So in our time, right, that's considered small. But we have to understand that that during their time that was probably really big. We've evolved to require more things, and probably more things than we actually need. Space that we actually need. We talk about need and not want, need. But the female of the species are more inclined to a scenario where their living space has to be something that is comfortable for them, right? And they're going to want the best that they can get for themselves. And that's nothing wrong with that. What you as a man now have to decide when choosing a wife is, can you afford? Hold on. Imam here has a question. Did Uthman leave in the first group and went to Medina? Yes, I do believe that he did. And some of the companions also left and went back to Mecca, like Abdullah bin Mas'ud. He did that, radiallahu anhu. Going back to having a place that's suitable for your spouse, you must first have an understanding between you and your partner, your wife, right? Because some women, their goals are different in life. Some women, even though all women, for the most part, like to be comfortable where they're at, because they spend majority of their time in house. So that the house is their abode, is something that is their castle. So they want it to be as comfortable as possible for themselves. Having a talk with your wife or an understanding with the person that you're going to marry, that, look, this is what I am, this is what I'm about to do, this is where I'm going to be. Because if you plan on living in a place where the living standards are a little bit lower, that might be a problem for her. That's why it's also good for a man, not good for women, but good for a man, that when he marries down. What I mean by marrying down, marrying someone who's not used to a social standard or economic, I'm sorry, not social, but economic standard that you are, right? So that way, when she comes into your social environment, it is a step up from what she's used to, so she will be grateful. Because what would happen the other way around, because some women, they're not able to help themselves in this regard. If they feel that they're not getting something that's equivocal to what they're used to or better, you will feel it. They'll make you know by their attitude, their speech, and all of that stuff. And you could say, well, what about the fear of Allah and stuff like that? We have to put that, to the side and stuff like that in certain instances when it comes to these scenarios, because Allah al-Musta'an only. Okay, so but this advice for brothers, sisters. Sisters, do not marry someone who you know that they are lower than you. And what I mean lower than you economically, because you're going to only oppress them in the long run and yourself. That's the only thing that's going to happen. Unless you're not that type of woman. You've never been that type of woman. You don't care about certain things when it comes to lifestyle, then that's okay. All right, so I think we covered everything, inshallah ta'ala. Dealing with that, so the Prophet ﷺ, he built 2 places, not one after another. One for Ummahat, one of the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, Sauda, and then the other for Aisha, but not one after the other. First, he built for Sauda because he was married to her, provided her with a place to live, and this place was connected to the masjid. It's important to know that the house, or the dwelling place of rooms, you could call it, of the Prophet's wives were connected to the masjid. And later on became part of the masjid. Now it's part of the masjid. They're no longer present, but the area where their houses were is not part of the current masjid, Prophet's masjid now. Okay. I don't think there are any questions there. Let's move on. Okay, so let's go into the issue now. We're going to go into the issue of fiqh. We're going to talk about the adhan. And what we're going to do is we're going to cover this from one school of thought first in this book. And then there will be this class and next class. We're going to cover this issue from one school of thought. Then we're going to cover the issue from differences of opinion, right? So we're going to do it 2 different ways. So that will be the third class, inshallah ta'ala. We're going to go over certain differences. So The word adhan, what does it mean? What does it mean linguistically? Anyone knows the word adhan? What does it mean linguistically? The literal definition. Now, what it means in Islam, but the word itself. Okay, to call out. That is correct. To announce, to call out, to announce, same thing, right? So yeah, that's basically what it means, right? To call out, or to announce. Now, Islamically, or as a terminology, Islamic terminology, it means a specific announcement or a specific call, right? And some people might go into more detail about this specific call, but we understand that that's the specificness of that entails, certain words, facing the Qibla, all of these things that you could put in a definition to kind of be more specific. Okay. The first thing the Sheikh says here is that the adhan is sunnah. The adhan is sunnah. And he says that this is according to the majority of the scholars. Wa huwa sahih. And this is the correct opinion. Notice that it's an opinion, right? But also, this opinion is backed up by ijma, consensus of the scholars, according to this imam. It says it is also from the sha'a'ir of Islam. It is from one of the rituals of Islam, one of the milestones of Islam. To the point where he says that حتى لو امتنع أو امتنع قوم عنه أجبرهم الإمام عليه. So to the point, so it is so important. The adhan is so important and so emphasized and such an integral part of Islam that if a group of people were to say we are not going to use, the adhan is only sunnah. Why call it? The imam, the leader of the Muslim, can force them to implement the adhan. But even though it's sunnah, it is such a stressed part of Islam that the imam can force individuals to implement it if they so choose not to. Now, some scholars say that you could even fight them, like how you can fight the Khawarij, or you can fight the people who decide not to pay zakat, like how Abu Bakr did during his caliphate. He fought the people that didn't want to pay the charity, and he fought them because that was the punishment for that act. Likewise, some scholars say you can fight them. And what we mean by fight, we mean going to war with, right? So you can fight them because they decide or they abstain from calling the adhan. And there is an opinion that it is wajib. There is an opinion that the adhan is obligatory. And the reason why this opinion is there is because the Prophet ﷺ commanded that the adhan should be called, saying that إِذَا حَضَرَتِ الصَّلَاةِ فَلْيُؤَذِّنْ لَكُمْ أَحَدُكُمْ. The Prophet ﷺ said that when the salat comes in, when the salat is in, right, it's time for the prayer, then one of you should call the adhan. That is a hadith. That is muttafaqun alayh. It is in Bukhari and Muslim. It is something that is part of the 5 prayers and Jumu'ah. This is where this sunnah, and what we mean by sunnah, not that it's not obligatory, we're just talking about this action of the Prophet ﷺ is for the 5 daily prayers and Jumu'ah. So anything other than that does not have an adhan. Anything other than the 5 daily prayers and Jumu'ah does not have a adhan. And then the Sheikh, he goes into like how the adhan is performed, you know. I think from that we can just take a little bit here, where he says, for example, that the adhan for Fajr you add after hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah, as-salatu khayrum min an-nawm, twice, right? You say twice. And there is a school of thought, which this Imam is part of, that says that the adhan and the iqamah are similar, meaning that in the way that they're said, that you say them twice. Except that the only difference is, for the adhan, you stop after every sentence, while the iqamah, you meld everything together. Everything is in one go. And I think this is as much as we're going to cover. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll complete this aspect of it next class. Are there any questions on anything we covered so far in regards to the adhan? Oh, it's really raining. مطرنا بفضل الله ورحمته صيبا نافعا. Okay, so if there aren't any questions on that aspect of the adhan, then we're going to move on to, I should have saved my space. SubhanAllah. Let me see if I can find it back. Okay, I'm going to have to do that later then. Find it. Okay, so we're going to talk about the issue of nikah, and then there's one issue that we're going to hopefully address. So here, Bismillah, we're going to continue talking about that verse, right? The verse, we're now talking about marriage. Issue of marriage. I remember last class we talked about the sunniyah, or the encouragement to get married in Islam, using the verse in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَنْ لَا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Right? And if you fear that you won't be just to the orphan, then marry whom you want to, or whom you will, from among the women, 2, 3, and 4. So we have a hadith that we're going to cover dealing with that. So giving a little bit more explanation to that verse, or at least the beginning part of that verse, right? So it says here, قال حدثنا إبراهيم بن موسى قال أخبرنا هشام عن ابن جريج قال أخبرني هشام بن عروة عن أبيه عن عائشة رضي الله عنها أن رجلا كان له يتيمة فنكحها وكان لها عذق وكان يمسكها عليه ولم يكن لها من نفسه شيء فنزلت فيه وإن خفتم أن لا تقسطوا في اليتامى أحسبه قال كانت شريكته في ذلك عذقي وفي ماله. Okay, so this hadith is reported by Urwa an Aisha radiyallahu anha, and Urwa is the nephew of Aisha. She said, radiyallahu anha, that a man had an orphan girl that he was in charge of, which he married. This is proof that shows that the wali can marry the individual that he's the wali of. The wali can marry an individual that he is the wali of. Right? Because here he's the wali of this orphan, and he married her. And this orphan woman had money. Basically, she had land, or most specifically land with dates on it, right? So he married her, and specifically for this reason. And he wasn't feeling her like that. I mean, he didn't really vibe with her for anything else other than the fact that she had some money with her and stuff like that, and everything. So because of that, he was treating her unjustly. He wasn't giving her her rights. And that's the reason why this verse was revealed. About, if you don't feel like you can be just concerning the orphans, right, then you should just marry anyone else from among the women, right? But the thing is that this person specifically married her because she had money. Now notice how there was no shaming though in this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to him about his intention. Anyone notice that? So I'm sure that the sisters would have a field day with the brother that married a sister because she was rich. Oh, you could just hear it now. What kind of man will do that? I guess men been doing that. Some men anyway. But of course, this is not something that we should encourage, because at the end of the day, you're going to have to take care of that sister anyway, right? So I mean, her having money and stuff like that, I mean, it really don't benefit you. If you're doing the right thing, it's not going to benefit you. And that's the reason why, a woman, when she says that, she has money or she works and she believes that this is an asset that a man would look at to determine whether or not he's going to marry her, that doesn't really work, because none of that money is going to, in most instances, in a lot of situations, is going to benefit him, because a woman would have her money, counting it right in front of her husband, and he don't know how he's gonna pay the light bill tomorrow, and not think twice. And that's just that's just it. I mean, she like, well, what are you gonna do? We lights about to close up, lights about to shut off and stuff. We ain't gonna have no electricity if you don't find another job, or sell a kidney, something. And that's well within her rights. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is that we, as men, we understand that. And that's the reason why we find it very strange that a woman will put as one of her, attributes that are praiseworthy and might be something that, would entice a suitor to look her way, is the fact that she's wealthy, she's of a person of high regards, she likes the finer things in life. When a man interprets, a lot of men, not every man, Balaf men, because most of us we have to work for our money. We're not princes here. So most of us, we're going to look at that and just think about all of the money that we're going to have to spend that we might not have in a scenario like that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So that's that with that specific verse. There's something I wanted to touch on a little bit before we close up. The issue of marijuana in Islam and using marijuana and whether or not it's allowed, is it halal, is it haram, and things like that. Let me preface this by saying that what I am about to say is in no way an Islamic ruling. This is an issue that I've been researching, and I continue to research it. And I'm just going to give you guys food for thought. More than anything, this is all it is. Islam is about bringing benefit. First, communal benefit. Secondly, individual benefit. And removing from a person the bad. But that is an Islamic principle. Keep that in mind. There's a verse that I for some reason it's not coming to my mind. I don't want to recite it wrong. Give me a second here. We're gonna dissect this verse. In order for us to be able to talk about this issue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعٌ لِلنَّاسِ وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. Allah says they ask you about alcohol and gambling. They ask you about alcohol and gambling. Say, O Muhammad, fihima, in them is a great sin. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, and some benefit to the people. In alcohol is a great sin and some benefit to the people. وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. But the sin, the bad that is in them is greater than the benefit. Okay? So we understand this. Now, someone would argue and say, there are certain things, or Allah here is talking about khamr, alcohol. What does that have to do with other things that aren't alcohol? And some might even argue and say that, well, he's not just talking about alcohol, he's talking about specific alcohol, which is alcohol that's produced by grapes. The alcohol that is produced by grapes, that is what is called khamr. The alcohol that's produced by honey is not called khamr. I think it's called miz'u. And the alcohol that's produced by fruits is bitru or biz'u or something like that. I can't remember. These names are kind of weird and stuff. Can't remember them all. But every different type of alcohol has a different name, like in English. Right? We have wine, we have rum, we have gin, we have scotch, we have beer. All of these things are alcohol. So what do the scholars say? The scholars say that the reason why these things are impermissible and fall underneath the umbrella of khamr is because it's basically the same thing. Different way, different process, different way it's made, but it's basically the same thing. It's alcohol. And that's the reason why the word for alcohol can loosely, or khamr can loosely fit into the word of alcohol. Okay. Why do we as Muslims have the understanding, for the majority of us, we have the understanding that marijuana is impermissible? Why do we have that understanding? Where did we get that from? We get that from the understanding that marijuana is similar to alcohol. And we could say that in a lot of instances it is. Marijuana is similar to alcohol in a lot of instances. Because when we talk about khamr, let's go back to the word khamr. We said that khamr is used in the place of the word alcohol, and the word khamr, kha, mim, ra, from that word, we also get words that are similar to it, so we can understand what the word khamr means. We get the word khimar, comes from the same root letters, right? Kha, mim, ra. What is a khimar? Khimar is what women wear. Where do they wear it? What type of clothing is it? The khimar for a woman. This one should be easy, right? The Imam is one step ahead of us. So the khimar, the reason why the khimar is called the khimar is because it covers the head of the woman. The reason why khamr is called khamr is because it covers the intellect of the person. It covers the mind. You lose your reasoning, your rational thought. Weed or marijuana is something that also affects the mind, and because of that, it's been put from that aspect. It's been put in the same category as alcohol. But what about the medicinal benefits of marijuana? Now, this is where we have to understand, right? There are medicine that have effect on your mind that are legal, and no one questions whether or not a Muslim can take it. There are medicine that say that you cannot operate a vehicle after taking it. Why is that? Because there is some veiling of your mental state. Yet no one questions whether or not it is permissible for an individual to take. There are side effects to a lot of there are medication that were once medication that we know now it's not medication, right? Like cocaine was once medication. Now it's not. Why is that? The bad effects of cocaine outweighs the good effects of cocaine. Like Allah said about alcohol. The sin is greater, and it has some benefit to people. It has some. There is a drug now that was that I think the company's being sued. It's a pain drug. I don't remember the name of it, but I'm pretty sure everyone knows what I'm talking about. And I think there are some the companies being sued because they knew it was addictive. It's a pain medicine. I don't know if it's Ritalin or what it is. And now you have like house moms and stuff like that are druggies. I'm sorry, not drunkies, druggies, right? Because of their addiction to this pill. But all it was a pain medicine. I'm mentioning all of these things so we can kind of just see where I'm going with all of this, I guess. When we look at marijuana, it shares certain attributes with alcohol. From an aspect, right? It does change the mind. But the argument can be made that there are other drugs that also change the mind. But what makes those drugs different than alcohol? Why don't we throw those drugs away and say, no, you can't? Oxycontin? Maybe. I have no idea. Why don't we throw those drugs away? The ones that, you can't operate a vehicle, or the ones that put you to sleep, knock you out, after taking it, the different side effects that these things have. We don't throw them away. Why is that? Because those things are not the main use of the drugs. Those are considered side effects. Right? You don't use the drug so that you cannot operate a vehicle. You can be so gone out of your mind that you don't know whether you're coming or going. That's not why you use the drug. You use it because relieving pain, doing whatever it is that it does and stuff like that, regulate some of your bodily functions or whatever. A person who's in extreme pain, who uses marijuana or the substance that's in marijuana, which is it was HTC, I think it's called, or something like that, to help regulate that pain. And the side effect that they get from that is that they're a little bit woozy. How is that different from any other drug that, or some other drugs that we have available? A person who has is that what I said? Did I say THC or I said something else? I don't know. A person who has issues with loss of appetite, and they take THC, and now they're able to eat instead of losing weight, extreme loss, instead of having extreme loss of weight and things like that. What can be said about these scenarios? After mentioning those things, I say that marijuana is not permissible for your average Muslim to use. I repeat, marijuana is not permissible for your average Muslim to use. But my statement there, is that any difference than saying any drug that's not prescribed to you is not permissible for you to use? Because of the harm that it can cause you if you're not a person that needs it. If you take a drug that you don't need, it can cause you harm. And from that aspect, those drugs are impermissible for you to use too. But what about the person that needs that drug? For his or her specific situation, that drug will not harm, but would help. So this is where I have reached in my research and in my assessment of the situation. Like I said, it's not a fatwa for or against. These are just things that I want you to think about, like I've been thinking about it. And because this is just me putting certain things for everyone to digest and think about, there will be no questions about this issue because I have no answers for you. So with that, I'm going to end the class by saying, أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Oh boy, this thing stuck. Subhanallah. Okay, there we go.